All right, CJ Stam, how's it going today?
It is going fantastic. How about for you, Conrad?
I'm doing well. You're now my co-host, so we're switching things up a little bit today. And normally I go to Brooke first, but I'm going to go your way first because we're going to get to him at the very end. Anything fun and exciting happen in your world? What's happening?
Wow, that is a great question. We obviously spent a lot of time prepping for this call, and I was definitely ready for that question. Yes, there's a lot of fun and exciting things that have happened. I would say probably the most interesting that's happened to me recently is that a lot of the things that we will probably talk about today have been implemented in my business because of the conversation that we're going to have today. And I find myself in a very unique position that I'm worrying less and less about what's happening every day, and I'm way more focused on the big picture and all of the things that are possible. And that is a paradigm shift for real. So I would say that is probably the most exciting thing that I could share with you today.
Nice. I like that. I think we're definitely going to come back to that. The one thing that we do on our team calls, I have like a team call on my side of things, CJ, is we go to you and we say, give me a personal win and then give me a professional win. Because I like it because people kind of talk about what they're doing at work and then they might talk about something outside of work, which I think is a good way to spend a team call just to hear about those kind of things. So again, I'd
say that's the work, but it has definitely impacted my personal life. I've spent really a lot more time working on just being a better version of myself.
Yeah.
A lot of inward focus.
Yeah, I like that. Awesome. Well, David, who's already a good version of himself by default, what's going on in your world? Anything fun, exciting? Same question. How are you?
It's hard to follow an answer that includes big picture and paradigm shift. I don't even know where we go after that. So anything I say is going to seem like I'm on this little picture, but I'll go with the personal win and then the business win. On the personal side, it's been really just great watching my kids all get established in a new school. And they're enjoying that. They're doing well with that. So like as a parent, that just means everything to me. And there's obviously challenges and you overcome those challenges. And so that was just a big win for us personally. And then on the business side, there's a lot going on, but it's really cool seeing this DMO product or destination marketing organization, convention and visitors bureau product take off under really the leadership of some of my team and watching that just really start to go. Started as a StaySense product. Now it's with Guesty, and it's just really taken off and got bigger than I am. And so that feels good to be able to kind of step out of something and then see it still move forward. So that would probably be the professional win right now.
Nice. Well, I like that. Well, Brooke, I guess I'll go to you. I mean, it is your podcast after all. So obviously we've got some special guests today. I sort of joked before we hit record that we're going to go to them first and go to you last. But what's going on? How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm actually a little nervous. This is weird. We're flipping it upside down this week. Usually I just show up and, we've done like 30 of these, I think, so far. But this one we're flipping a little upside down where I'm going to be in the crosshairs.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's only fair to put you in the crosshairs and put some good prosecutors next to me. You know what I mean? Like I could ask you your mistakes. We could have just done this two ways, but it was your idea to bring these guys on and they can give you some body shots. Maybe David can kind of sweep your legs a little bit. CJ can hit you in the side of the head. Just fun stuff. It's all good. So for the listener, maybe this could be their first episode. That is plausible. I guess that could be, the case. Maybe we should get a little bit more context. So Brooke, when you wrote the book or when you were putting the book together, you did your top 10 mistakes. So maybe you could talk a little bit about why you wanted to put your 10 mistakes in there. You could have just done everybody else. Why did you put yours in there? You didn't have to.
Well, actually, when we originally did this, obviously it didn't start as a book. It didn't start as a podcast. I just, it was a post on LinkedIn, and I just go around and ask a bunch of the people I knew in the community and ask them to share their top 10 mistakes. And, as we started doing it and I realized we had some really good content here, I said, you know what, and this is maybe about 30, 40 people in, so almost towards the end, I said, you know what, maybe it'd be fun to actually for me go through the exercise and actually write my top 10 mistakes. I wonder what they would be. And I went through the process and it was pretty cathartic. I mean, it was this really fun, maybe not fun is the right word, but it was just an interesting experience going back and looking at my tenure, at Vantage and launching that company and just kind of going over the mistakes. And I did kind of enjoy the process. And I figured, I ended the book. Actually, mine was the last one. Mine was the last post. It was post number 52, and it was the last one in the book. And and as we were kind of going through all the different podcasts and everything else, I said, you know what, maybe it's a good, very apropos here to bring in two good close friends and kind of turn the camera, so to speak, and let them ask questions about my top 10 mistakes.
Yeah. So CJ, we already did a podcast with you, so people can go back in the feed and they can, scroll back to, I think, pretty early on, and you did your top 10 mistakes, but we haven't really had the chance to ask anybody about that moment. Like Brooke was saying, it was actually cathartic, or it felt good for me to like write these down and talk about them. How did you feel when you were writing up your 10 mistakes and sending them into Brooke? What was your reaction to that?
I would say it was the same. I mean, it's good to do reflection in that way. It was also interesting. I may have mentioned this on the first podcast, but it was even more interesting to see others rolling out and how some people took a positive twist. They didn't actually say mistakes. They actually went straight to the things that they learned, as opposed to focusing on the hurdle or that pitfall, the thing that set them back. And that was, for me, it was probably the best part of the process. Wasn't just my own, but it was seeing everybody else's as well. It's not a misery loves company thing, but it is definitely a wow. There are so many similar mistakes that have been made. I'm not alone. This isn't just me and the one thing that I did wrong or I learned from. That this is just something inherent, I think, not just to business, but I often joke about like how crazy it is that we got into a business like this that is like extraordinarily dynamic. There's so many moving parts. There's so many opportunities to screw up. And the way that a lot of us got into it was the same, not necessarily intentionally, right? You just kind of found ourselves in this business. And again, all of these things, when you put them together, it equals that same result. Like a lot of the mistakes that you see in the book are similar, but they came from just different angles. And I enjoyed that.
Yeah. I feel like, David, you very much have that accidental story. All the people have an accidental story, but I think yours is even more abnormal. They're all sort of abnormal, but like the training and the skills you had personally and the businesses you were involved with, and like you were a pilot before, like you ended up in a crazy way, like in this space. But like what CJ kind of said there ring true for you as well? Like reading other people's mistakes was like eye-opening for you getting into the business, doing all these other things previously too.
Yeah, I think you have to be doing something incredibly exceptional to make mistakes that other people have not made before. And so I haven't done anything that exceptional. So it was awesome to see, okay, other people are making these mistakes as well. I'm not trying to put a guy on the moon or anything crazy. I'm trying to host people in a property or run a tech brand or whatever it is, these things that everybody else has done before me. And so it's both reassuring, but then it's kind of like this, man, why didn't I reach out to more people when I was starting this so I could avoid all these mistakes? And then, yes, there was that side of it that was therapeutic, but there was also this side of reviewing those mistakes and being like, oh crap, I'm still making some of these. Let's stop right now and not do this like over and over again.
Yeah. Well, Brooke, one of the most common things that I think people actually had in common, I know sometimes we're reading them off during the episodes and people will say like, you'll reference other people that mention the same mistake, is actually not reaching out to other people, to like what David was just saying, right? They're like, they were in their little bubble, they were in their little cocoon, they weren't reaching out. We'll go through yours in a second, obviously, but what's your reaction when you read some of these ones that were like, when you saw some of those same mistakes, Brooke, repeated again and again, was your reaction to like, I've already seen that before, therefore I don't need to talk about it at length? Or were you actually trying to like emulate, like when you wrote your mistakes, were you thinking back to all the ones you'd read before, I should say, excuse me, or were you thinking of new things that?
No. I went through it when I went through my mistakes. I literally went through it just from a clear sense, from a just what is it for me? You know what I mean? What were my mistakes that I made and didn't think about anybody else's? Now, yes, there were some that obviously were common and kind of shared across everybody else's, but I didn't write it because they were in there. I really tried to make a conscious effort to go through there and make my own, write my own true mistakes.
Yeah, right on. Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, we've got plenty of time today, I think, to kind of go through them all. And I kind of plan to going around the horn the best I can and getting through them. So if you guys are cool with it, let's do number one from Mr. Brooke Pfautz himself. Number one, not understanding the lifetime value of new inventory and truly how valuable it is to the bottom line at business valuation. Additionally, not understanding the holy grail of all inventory metrics, lifetime value to customer acquisition costs, or LTV to CAC. So a lot of words in there. Brooke, could you summarize kind of this one of how did you end up learning that? Was it during Vintory? Was it actually at the end of Vantage? When did you kind of learn this mistake, and how did you adapt going forward?
So I actually don't even think I really truly understood it until well after I left Vantage. I think I learned it, at my Vintory days, because I didn't know any of these core metrics. I didn't know what lifetime. I mean, I didn't know what the average lifetime was. I never knew how to calculate, lifetime by taking, 1 divided by churn to get your lifetime. Like I didn't know that. I always knew that. For me, I knew inventory was the goal, and I knew we had to add inventory. And I knew by adding inventory, obviously that was the greatest lever that we could pull that increased our top line revenue. I knew that part of it. But what I didn't ever do is I didn't go through and actually calculate, okay, if I sign up one new property, what does that generate in revenue per year? And then what falls to the bottom line in net profits? And then how long am I going to keep that property in my rental program? Because it's really hard to calculate a lifetime when you're in the first month or the first year of your business. Like, how do you figure that out? You don't know a lifetime. So until I kind of actually, I think it was actually much later, even in the, maybe a year or two in with Vintory, where I was actually learning more about SaaS metrics, where I would watch these. Actually, I know exactly where it was. It was when I was actually at LiveRes, and I was really studying SaaS metrics, and I was understanding the correlation of this. And it was this light bulb moment of like, oh my God, like this actually correlates very, very similar. The parallels are uncanny with short-term rentals. And that's when it kind of all came together. And, and when you started going through the math and everything else, and I said, look, this is a no-brainer. And then I still remember one of the first presentations I did for Vintory, very prominent, well-known vacation rental management company with a leader and founder there. She's been in the business for 30 years. I started going over the same kind of metrics, and she said the same thing. She goes, Brooke, I've been in this business for 30 years. She had like 400, 500 properties under management. She's like, I've never gone through the value of this, and she's never gone through the math. So at least I wasn't alone, but it really did take a long time. And then also realizing when you're selling your management company, like that is the true value of what they're buying. They're buying those management contracts. They're not buying your beautifully wrapped truck. They're not buying your office. They're not buying even really your guest database. They might get a little bit of a bump for it, but not really. What they're buying is strictly those management contracts. And, once I started getting data from like Jacoby and, some of these other people of like what these contracts were worth, that was really kind of eye-opening for me. And even the when I sold to my business partner, we had some random formula to sell that had no bearing on the value of the actual inventory because we didn't know any better. We didn't go to a Ben Edwards or Jacoby Olin to really truly understand what it was worth. We just kind of threw a revenue multiple in there, and that was it.
Yeah. CJ, what's kind of your reaction? And I'm assuming you've kind of read through these Brooks mistakes, maybe just be like, did you know about some of these metrics, CTV or CAC to LTV? What was kind of your reaction when you learned about some of these things that Brooke mentions in his first mistake?
So just listening to Brooke speak right there, I made a note here to the side, realizing value. Like, I'm going to stop for a moment and just say to Brooke, like, realizing his value, because I do remember the LTV to CAC when that happened. It was at LiveRes. Brooke, your value is like, to me, you're Professor Brooke. Like, there are seriously so many things that you might not have realized it at the time, but there were people that would just hang on every word, like that you would say in your diligence when you'd study things, how you'd understand them and how you would experiment with them and put them out front. You may not have realized the value that you were creating at that time, but for me, like listening to you, the first time I met you down in Orlando, I was like, that guy like knows what he's talking about. And I wanted to learn it all. Like, I want to hear what this guy has to say. So I remember when you did that, because I went back and we did that exercise as well. And I remember doing the LTV to CAC on guests, like taking our marketing budget, dividing it into the total number of transactions, and being like, oh, every time our phone rings, it was $8. Like, that's $8 worth of value when the phone rings. And being able to go to my team and be like, yo, that's worth $8 every time the phone rings. Like, all of a sudden it clicked. Just simplifying that formula down to one statement to my team created value for them, right? That value started with you, but through that process, it got transferred to them. Same with our owner relations team. Like, when we really looked at how much it costs to acquire a homeowner and then what that value is over the long term, so simple to say, hey guys, it costs this much to get it, and this is what it means to the company over the long run. They didn't have to understand the formula. They understood the output, right? But yeah, that was a major, like, great lesson that I learned from you. Mm-hmm. Whether you realize it was happening or not, man, people around were like, if Brooke speaks, you listen.
I didn't know that, but thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
It's true.
Yeah. Well, David, maybe your reaction to it, because of course you ended up selling, your vacation rental management side of the company at one point. Did you kind of really have a good handle at that point on like the valuation of the contracts that you were selling off, or what was kind of your knowledge base as you went through that process yourself?
I mean, my knowledge was I wanted out. Property management was tough. And I was done with property management. I was a tech guy that somehow found my way into the wrong lane. And
you're like, you'll give me money for this? Wait, I would have given it to you for free.
I would have given it to you, so you'll pay me? Great. No, I would say on lifetime value, though, when we think about a business, an old school marketing guy, Jay Abraham, came up with what's called the geometric growth formula, which is there's 3 ways to grow your revenue. You can increase the number of customers you have, you can increase the frequency your customers buy from you, and you can increase the ticket average. And those are really the 3 ways you increase your revenues. And so when we think about that, really all 3 of those plug into what Vintory offers, what property managers are doing on a daily basis, which we're trying to sign more homeowners. And then when we have them, like all of the things we're doing at that point around distribution and price optimization are really about increasing the lifetime value of each of those contracts. So 100% agree that this is something we have to have a good handle on as an industry. We need to know our multiples. We need to know what each of these contracts is worth to our company. And to Brooke's point about the wrapped vehicle not being where it's at, I've had the opportunity to sell a few businesses, and I can tell you typically the intangible property is where most of the value of a business lies. It's in customer goodwill and customer lists and that type of things. And when we sold to V-Trips, back when we sold our property management business, we only sold the contracts. We retained the technology, we retained the brand, and we sold the owner contracts. I can tell you, owner contracts are worth a lot of money without the wrap truck.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point, David. We've never thought about that example. But Brooke, like most of these companies that sold to Vacasa or those types of things, the website was shut down effectively. Like the company just basically ceased to exist. I mean, in David's example, he only sold the contracts and it had a lot of value. I don't know if you have anything to add into that, but that's really interesting. Like example of like proving your point very succinctly. Like there was a buyer out there, in this case, Steve Milo, that was willing to give David money for just the homeowner contracts.
And look, that is obviously the exception to the rule. Most of the time they are buying obviously websites. In some cases they won't, but you do get a little bit of a lift, and you do get a little bit of value obviously for your website. You obviously have, if you have organic traffic coming to that website and you've got direct bookings, there's definitely value there. But I'm sure we could bring Jacoby on, and he's saying like when he looks at the actual term sheet, they're not given a lot of value for that. I mean, what they're really buying again is the contracts, and then what they're tying the earnouts to and everything else is all contingent on the property staying on board. That's really what matters. Again, you might get a nice little lift, a little bit of goodwill, but it's very minimal when it's all said and done.
Yeah. Well, not to get into SEO discussion, because Dave and I could spend an hour doing an SEO discussion, so we shouldn't do that. But if you go look at the growth of Vacasa purely from an SEO perspective, because they bought and acquired so many companies over the years, vacational companies over the years, and they started folding those domains into Vacasa is actually pretty solid, pretty strong from an SEO perspective. And I remember they bought a client of ours that we'd worked on for years, got them to number 1 in a specific market. I'll tell you the market, Steamboat Springs, and Vacasa was kind of nowhere to be found. They bought this company, took on the 40 units, and that's where the cash was transferred, to your point, Brooke. But then they got to 301, this domain over to the Vacasa Steamboat Springs landing page, and then Vacasa has done very well in Steamboat since then from an organic perspective for both homeowner acquisition and for guest marketing too. So there's definitely some extra perks there. I would say it's undervalued, but I'm very biased here, Brooke, so you can't take my word for it. But all right, so let's go to number 2 to keep things moving. Number 2, taking on the wrong properties and not focusing on just the few key buildings in your market. Ocean City at the time, if memory serves. Yeah. Furthermore, not requiring certain standards for those properties early on. These mistakes ended up causing a lot of operational efficiencies, low profit margins, and guest experience. This has to be one of the most common ones, Brooke. So you did it yourself too. When you hear and kind of relate to people on this side of things, how did you eventually raise the standard, or what made you recognize that properties were not meeting the type of property you actually wanted to manage?
Well, once the season started and you had the guests screaming at you, you learn really quickly that like next year I'm not bringing on this kind of a property, and it solves itself very quickly because you have to then sweep up your mistakes that you made from signing up the wrong property. But yeah, I mean, look, I was so focused on growth. I was so focused. I had very aggressive goals. I had these goal numbers that I had to hit every single month, every single year, that all I cared about was signing up the properties. And what I was doing is I was doing it on a per property count. I was doing it on a unit basis. I wasn't doing it on a top line gross booking revenue, which is what I should have done, because that's really where you're making your money. And then again, after that first season or first couple of seasons where all these crappy properties where there was no standards, there was no inspections done, that we were just signing up, I'm now trying to fix all this. And it was just absolute chaos in the middle of the season where you've got hundreds, if not thousands of guests checking in over a 8-10 week period. And it was just, it was just like to David's point, it made you want to leave the business. It made your life a lot more difficult. But then what we realized was after, the end of the season, that we actually started looking at the financials, and we actually could break down the revenue and income from a per property basis. We realized we're like, wait a sec. There are these 4, 5, 6 different buildings where these properties had the most income, the most revenue, therefore the most profits. They had the least guest complaints. And it was truly, win-win-win all the way around. We're like, let's focus on these. And then we really took, and again, this probably took maybe 2 or 3 seasons for us to finally realize this. And then from that point, what we ended up doing is we're like, look, let's just focus on these buildings. So rather than just trying to get every single, condo in, a 9-mile strip of, sand in Ocean City, Maryland, we just said, let's build like a really targeted marketing campaigns to these buildings. We created microsites for every single one of these. We felt like we were almost like the official management company of those buildings, even though we weren't, just based on the microsites that we set up. And once we kind of had that epiphany, then it was really kind of a game changer. So our growth goal definitely went down a little bit, but it was then more based on that top line revenue number, and obviously just having a little bit of sanity during the season and not having to worry about all the guests calling and complaining.
It seems like a quality of life discussion, CJ, right? Like what kind of quality of home do you want to manage, or cabin maybe in your market? What have you gone through that same evolution yourself of like taking on stuff that really ended up being a bad fit? And how did you pivot, like Brooke, to find the right inventory in your market?
So I'm sitting here right now visualizing a unicorn sprinkling dust out of its behind, flying over a rainbow with clouds, because like this is the beautiful thing about vacation rentals, like the power of Brooke, right? You can start in vacation rentals with almost nothing, right? And you can go after whatever inventory you want to get this thing started, right? And we sit like now, I believe everybody, here on this call can understand the power of hindsight, right? It's easy to look back and say, after I built that first part, then I can start to be selective. But that's the beauty of it. You can start at zero. You can stumble into this business with one home or no homes, and just under grit and sheer determination alone, start and build a vacation rental business from nothing, right? The power of some of these PMS systems we don't charge you really anything until you make money. I mean, that's what attracted me to the first PMS that I used. I didn't have the money. I only had a couple assets that I was managing at the time. But I would say that's really, like, to me, the most powerful part about this is that you get to the point where you've grown a business that you can be more selective if you don't have the capital, right? But then there's the other side. We've seen this a lot more as this industry has professionalized. you've got people coming in with money, with tech savvy, with understanding of how other markets work, and they're coming in with capital, right? They can buy a company if they want to, or they can go use a service like Vintory and go and build markets out with that, with that money that they do have, or that investment that they have to put in it. So at the end of the day, the way I see this is it really depends on where you're at in the cycle, right? And absolutely, looking back, I've taken on a bunch of homes that I just needed the inventory, right? And I did the best that I could with it. I tried to make I would go out and stage homes to try to make them look as good as I possibly could to, create success for that stakeholder, right? And now we sit in a position, our company is much larger now. We don't really have to prove things the same way now that we used to, because we have a proven method. Like if you put your home onto our program, it's going to move, and we can be more selective. But it also puts us in I'll end on this, a very unique situation. We still have homes come to us that do not qualify for our program, but we can be generous enough, right? Because I tell my team all the time, you never say no to a home over the phone. You go out, you see the home, meet the homeowner, find out where they're at, find out what threshold they have for investment. And maybe you can take a home and say, look, I like your home, I like you, but in order for it to be successful on our program, you need to do these things, right? And you have that luxury happen sometimes later in the cycle. So yeah, I totally related to this one too.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing, CJ, that people sometimes don't recognize is the fact that they're coming to you because they want help. And I think it's like, this is something I've struggled with in my own business, like rejecting someone based only on the number of properties or based solely on, a bit of information they fill out in a form. Well, like maybe I could do that. And like 90% of the time it's right to reject someone that has one property, for example, on my contact form, but that doesn't make it a good idea, because for every, that 10% that really matter, like I might miss out on an awesome opportunity because they go, yeah, I've only got one property with rents for $4,000 a night. It's a 12-bedroom mansion on a private island. So I'd be an idiot if I just like rejected them out of my lead system based on that one piece of information, right? And if they want help, like to your comment there about, oh, well, if you add a hot tub and do this and do this and do this, and this property will be successful, they may go, oh, okay, I can do that. Like they may have been very willing to work with you, but if you didn't have that conversation, you missed out on the opportunity. So
they just needed someone to care and take the time to go and sit down with them.
Exactly. Well, maybe David, you could speak to your inventory acquisition strategy. Was maybe that part of your motivation of why you had ended up wanting to sell later? Did you have like the wrong homes on your program? Is that your perception, or what's kind of your reaction to what Brooke said and CJ said?
This was actually something that we did a pretty good job on. Early on, we had no properties signed, and we had somebody come to us with 40-something units wanting us to manage it. And we turned it down because these were all budget level condos. And I didn't want that to be what we stood for as a company. And it's like, how do you then go sign a luxury lodge if you have 42 nasty condos on your site? Nothing wrong with this like budget, like very bottom tier inventory. But if that's what you start with and you have dozens of these properties, you aren't going to ever get the high quality inventory. So we had to say no to that, which was hard because we had no money coming in at that point. And we were pretty choosy. We were selective on where we marketed to. At one point, we even sent overnight boxes to an entire neighborhood that we wanted to operate in. And so to the owners of all of those properties. And we spent about $100 per door. And we got fruit from that. Those leads progressed through the funnel. And so we were pretty good at this, but we did have to fire a homeowner occasionally, not too often. And that was always a tough conversation, but it really came back to, at the end of the day, what did we want our brand experience to be? And if we didn't ever go through and refine our inventory over time and get rid of the bottom performers, we weren't being fair to ourselves or that homeowner. And so that's how we viewed it. There was actually a really good consumer-facing article recently in the Wall Street Journal about, are you expecting too much from your Airbnb? I think was the headline. And in this article, it talked through basically the ways people have higher expectations on budget properties. And they had a few hosts that they talked to and things. And so it actually brought it down to numerical data. And it was something like the cleaning scores were higher on the higher priced properties than they were on the lower priced properties. And the overall review scores were higher the more somebody paid. And it's a bit counterintuitive. You might think on $1,000 or a $10,000 a night property, people are going to be super, super picky. But what they actually found at the aggregated data level is once somebody's in that $100 a night property, they're actually more emotional about a cleaning issue. And of course, you don't have the same kind of money to make the place spotless. And so it was it tied right into this. And I don't know if you can put it in the show notes, but I'll send you a link for it.
Yeah, we could definitely put it in the show notes. I think I read that headline, David, but I didn't read the article. But that's a good call out of like the type of customer you want. I think, Brooke, maybe that's what you ended up discovering here, right? The type of customer you want, that's both on the guest side and the homeowner side. If you get the wrong homeowner customer, we all know that's a pain in the tail. We've covered that length on previous episodes, but it seemed like your learning was ultimately from the guest side. The guest is kind of the ultimate tastemaker for the quality of the property and things like that, because if they're leaving you bad reviews, like that makes your life a pain. So maybe that if we listen to the guest, we get to the right outcome eventually. Is that a fair statement, Brooke, from your perspective?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the guest is almost like the thermometer that's telling you whether or not you have the right property or not.
Yeah, right on. Awesome. Well, let's skip along to number 3 then. Number 3, not truly understanding how important recruiting and building out a team was to the success of the organization. You should have made this your primary job as CEO. You also did not hire an integrator, CEO, COO, or GM role to complement your wide and vast weaknesses. That's what you said, not me, wide and vast weaknesses. So I know you've talked at length about the show about what you've done today to kind of change that, but maybe talk me through that. What made you change? What made you say, this is where I'm weak, I need to have this person helping me? And what about that recruiting side of it? When did you turn on to the fact of hiring the right people is the main problem?
Look, I don't think I learned. I mean, I don't think I learned this until well into even Vintory. I mean, look, I've started 4 companies, and it's, if you think about it, really, I mean, what is a business? Unless you have some crazy kind of like IP or patent on something, the real value of your company just comes down to the team that you build. So it's almost kind of like how Elon Musk, like he looks at things where, like when he's building Tesla, he's more interested in building the factory and building the robots that are going to build the cars. Here, it's the same thing. Here, like, look, if I have an idea, the only way it gets executed well is by the team that I bring together. And if you think about, like, I'm sure we've all had this experience, like the quality of your life, going back to what CJ said before, really, it comes down to very often, it's like your lieutenants, the team that you've assembled and how good they are is going to make your life so much easier. I mean, think about when you have that one rock star team member, and let's say maybe you have somebody that's a little bit subpar, and then you have something that you have that key customer that needs to get something done, and you can throw it to, Jill, and she's going to take care of it and handle it. Or you can throw it over to the other person. You're like, oh my God. And you're just like, cringing your teeth and saying your prayers, whether or not it gets handled or not. So it just really, I mean, it's taken me 4 businesses, I think, to really, truly realize this. My number one job as CEO is to recruit a kick-ass team. That's it. If you have the right idea in the right market at the right time, at that point, it's just the team that you surround yourself. And going on to the second part, and this kind of actually parlays a little bit to, I think, the next one we're going to talk about with, psychometric personality assessments like Culture Index and Predictive Index. But, look, there's certain things I think I do pretty well at, but there is a whole bunch of things I am not good at. I'm not an SOP person, right? I'm not a ops person. I'm not one to sit there and, build out the manual to how to do things. But I think I'm pretty good at sales and marketing. I think I'm pretty good at vision. I think I'm pretty good at, just the, growth. But it's like, it's kind of like the proverbial dog that catches the bus. It's like, here I can sign up all these properties, but if I don't have that person behind me to kind of make sure that the wheels aren't falling off the bus, like I'm in a whole world of hurt. And that's what happened for us early on. I mean, I could sign them up. I could get these properties on, but we didn't have that GM. We didn't have that COO, that integrator, if you want to use EOS speak. I'm definitely the visionary. I didn't have that integrator, and I needed it so badly. But again, it took me until, like I said, well after I sold. We'll probably talk about this later. I probably would not have sold. I think I've said this a couple times on the podcast. I probably wouldn't have sold Vantage where we were had I had that good, solid number 2 person that I could, bounce things off of. Kind of the position we're in right now. With Vintory, I know with Randy, he's our COO. He's our integrator. I know I can trust him, and I know I can trust him to get those things done, handle the operations side of it, and just trust that it will get done. So there's a lot to be unpacked there, but it's taken me 4 startups and 30 years just about into my career to actually figure this out.
Yeah. Well, maybe CJ, I could just frame the question as people, as you've grown your company and you've now, I think, acquired other companies and things like that. How have you gone through your process of hiring people, bringing the right people on to your organization that you're a part of?
So we've just recently gone through what I would refer to as evolution of our company. And it applies to a person as much as it applies to an organization. What got you here isn't necessarily going to get you there, right? And sometimes it's the hardest thing, especially for someone like me, right? Knowing myself, I'm an empath, right? I can hold people accountable. I can inspire people. I know what I'm good at, but I'm not always good at saying, "Hey, you've gone as far as you can with us. It's time to go," or you failed at something. So, because I will pour back into that person and believe in them sometimes, even when they do not have the will themselves to correct it. Like they just want the paycheck. And that's a hard thing to sometimes differentiate between someone that's actually going to work because they want to get better and they want to see the company move forward, and somebody that's going to fake it and trick you just so they can get that next paycheck again. And they'll just keep taking from you and taking from you and taking from you. And I had that happen numerous times as I was growing the company and evolving it, where I would keep pouring into somebody that literally was just a life vampire, right? They gave me the confidence in that meeting that they were gonna get it right the next time, and they meant well and all that stuff. And it's like, how many times do you go through that? So, I'd say that Southern Comfort's Cabin Rentals has gone through maybe 3 evolutions since the pandemic. I mean, we learned a lot being completely inundated with customers, where it was like you couldn't even breathe. Every time someone checked out, someone else was checking in. It was just survive, right? That was the motto, right? Just survive. And we did, but we came out of it on the other side and realized there were some things that were going to have to change. And there were some things that we needed to, instead of just saying we wanted to do those things, we had to actually really do them and bolt them down and implement them. Culture index. That's a big one that we used. And I would say, that's another one that I learned from Brooke and implemented. EOS, it's another one. Like these things got implemented and we adhered to them, and we became students of them and power users of those tools. And it's just helped us now to grow a team into a place to where we can pour back into our team, right? And our team is going to feel it coming back out on the other side, right? And it will also indicate very quickly if the person's not in the right seat. And we can now have a chance at correcting it and putting them in the right seat, or saying, hey, this didn't work out. So there's a lot of, to Brooke's point, you got to know what your own strengths are, and the people on your team need to know what their strengths are. And then it's just a matter of just that puzzle, like putting it together, making sure you got the right people in the right place. I'm in a book right now, Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. Like, what a fantastic book. It's just singing to me, because a lot of it's like these 10 mistakes right now, looking at these saying, wow, this is hindsight. I've done all of these things, or a majority of these things. I can definitely relate with them. Now in this book on Buy Back Your Time, the same thing's happening. I'm reading things in it. I'm like, check, check, check. It's saying you're not the only one that had that thought. That wasn't unique, right? You implemented this thing, created that boundary, got your time back, focused on the right thing, right? Now for me as a leader in my organization, it's like, how can I do that for somebody else? Right? How can I do that down in my organization? That's gonna grow them. That's gonna put them in a place to where, to Brooke's point, like they're going to make the best possible decision. Like, how can you have everybody in your organization that's that Jill that he mentioned? Like, it doesn't matter who they are. I trust them. They're here and they're employed right now because I trust them. Right? That is like, wow, boom, huge epiphany. Imagine having a Jill everywhere on your team. and you didn't have to, you know what I'm saying? You never had to like, oh, now I got to get involved and figure out like this thing's got to go to that person. Like you got to have a good mix of people that know how to specialize, but are also general enough. They understand your mission. They understand what the job is. And they're not going to say, that's not my job. They're going to say, okay, what's the problem? How can I make this person feel like I heard them and I'm going to figure it out? Even if I'm not the one that's the solution provider at the end, I'm going to hear them, right? And I'm going to go figure it out. So yeah, buy back your time if you've not done that one. That's a great book.
Yeah. So David,
Speaks,
like Brooke,
you've been all this in 3.
Yeah, absolutely. David, I mean, like Brooke, you've been a part of many companies and many of those companies have a lot of team members. So I guess I'm curious, CJ talked about his evolution there with like finding the right people. It sounded like a lot of what you talked about there, CJ too, by the way, just before I go to David, is like what their attributes are, not what their previous experience is. But most resumes are like, I used to work at this company. It's not like, here's what I'm good at. Like, it seems like that's 2 different things. So I don't know if you had any reaction to that comment before we went over to David, but it's like, you're looking more for traits, less for like, oh, I worked 4 years at your competitor or something like that.
Totally.
Right.
It's important to look at both things, but it's also the question is, were you happy with what you were doing at your last job? I mean, just because you did it doesn't mean that you were doing what you were happy doing or what you were meant to do, what you felt your life's calling was.
Right, exactly. So
it's
sorry, now David, going your direction.
It's a paycheck then.
Right. And there's that, lack of care, that sort of thing. So what's been your process, I guess, on your side, David, as far as like hiring people, building the right teams, that sort of thing? And I know you have high standards, which is a good thing, but how do you find people that can meet your standard and you're happy with?
We didn't use the psychometric tests. That's not because they aren't awesome. I didn't know about them and I didn't want to pay the however much it was per month for those tests early on in startup days. I did lean heavily on my experience on the interview board of previous companies where I would see what worked and what didn't, as well as interviewing at some pretty competitive companies like NetJets. It was a couple-day interview process with all these different interview boards. And so I got to see how they operated things. And what I took away from that is almost everybody was using a formulaic approach to this, where you would expose those traits in the same way we were just talking about. And they used what some people would call like tell me about a time questions. But the problem with tell me about a time questions is they oftentimes do not actually elicit a good response because you don't set them up properly. And so like an example of that would be, tell me about a time you had a problem with a coworker. And everybody's ready for that question, right? And they have their little canned answer that's all set and ready to go. The way this works much better is if when you're trying to elicit what's called a SAR, or a situation, action, response, and result answer from that individual. So you can understand how they think and how they solve a problem and what their traits are. Is you take the question and you set it up just slightly different to play a mind trick on them. And so that same question of tell me about a time you had a problem with a coworker, it'd be like, hey, close your eyes. How many people are on your team today? I want you to picture those people. Okay, now picture the one that's your least favorite on the team. Tell me their first name. Okay, it's Eric. Great. Okay, open your eyes now. Now, I understand from our little bit of time together, you seem like a pretty reasonable person. So you wouldn't have picked Eric if there wasn't a reason. What was your reason for picking Eric as your least favorite person on the team? Can you give me a specific example? So they may have had their little, tell me about a time you had conflict, perfect encapsulated answer. And you've asked the exact same question, but you set it up a little bit differently. And now to be fair, you need to do this exact same process for everybody. And you have to have the same questions that are landmine questions. You have to, which a landmine question is one, if they get this wrong, there's no way you're hiring them if they get everything else right. So it's going to be like something culture, or it's going to be something around legality. And so that was part of it. And then the other thing that we really like to do was hire people early on in their careers. To the resume point, I would much rather start with a blank canvas than negative transfer. So going back to SEO, since that's a world we've both lived in, Conrad, give me somebody that doesn't know anything about SEO versus somebody that thinks they know everything about SEO. Because somebody that thinks they know everything about SEO knows all the wrong ways to do it. Give me somebody that can think correctly, understands marketing, and understands like psychology. I can make them great at SEO. But you give me somebody that thinks they know everything, this is going to be a long, hard slog before I have to fire you. And so that's kind of how we would approach the hiring.
Yeah.
Conrad, remind me never to interview with David.
He's going to get you on your back foot quick, man. Quick.
Says Brooke. Brooke gives me a psychometric test and then doesn't even give me a reason other than I picked a few words. And he's like, "Oh, you're unhireable."
Was it wrong?
I mean, you didn't try to hire me, so we'll never know.
The one thing that kills me.
Don't worry, Dave. I'd hire you.
Yeah. There you go. The one thing that killed me about the test that you gave me, Brooke, is that I went down the list of all the other people that are like contractors and employees on the team. I'm like, God, no one else is this one, which makes me think they're really weird. So that's where I feel bad, David, is that he gave me one that's very uncommon. So I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing at this point, but yeah. Awesome. Well, number 4 then, Brooke, I think we kind of just touched on it. So I don't know if we need to go into much more detail on it, but number 4, just for the benefit of the listener, was not leveraging psychometric personality assessment tools earlier to get the right people in the right seats. Anything we missed there, or did we cover it well in that last
I mean, I guess I think the thing that's relevant right now with this is I'm actually hiring for a role. It's a billing specialist, which is obviously they need to be very detailed, very accurate, very precise. And previously, like when we would hire this, we would look at completely like what both David and CJ talked about. We would look at their resume. We would like how much experience do they have doing this. But the irony is there's a lot of people out there that have a lot of experience that are 100% the wrong person. And I would never hire them to manage our books and to have that role. So, I mean, I'm weeding out, 60, 70, 80% of my applicants just because they're not the right person. They should not be doing this, even though they might have the greatest experience. But again, to David's point earlier, there's a lot of people in there that have the perfect profiles and they just have a little bit of experience, and we're going to interview them. But we would have probably shown them. We probably wouldn't have responded just because they didn't have the experience. So I would exactly what David said. I'd much rather have the person that has the ability to do the job in the right way and that detail and that accuracy than have somebody that just has a really loaded resume with maybe miserable in what they were doing.
Yeah. Well, we all encounter that in our day-to-day lives. Like when we have to interact with other companies or other people, I'm like, I don't think you should be doing customer service. You don't seem very happy doing this. Like I realize that's your job, but it's not your thing. So I'm with you on that. I think we can learn a lot from that. I want to be cognizant of time. So let me go ahead to number 5 here. Number 5, short-sighted thinking that everyone need to be physically located in office or in the market and not taking advantage of remote workers. I guess it's kind of going down this people thread, but like opening that, audience to a wider set of people to work with ended up getting better people. What was kind of the change you made to remote work over time?
Yeah, I mean, well, so in most resort markets, it's a very small talent pool very often. You know what I mean? You're not getting, you're not in a big city, where you have a lot of people to choose from. There's a lot of times people go to resort markets for a reason. It's after, I always felt like, there was the people that just recently got divorced, or just got out of rehab, or there was some kind of reason why they felt like they were coming to the beach. But, you just have a smaller talent pool. It's the facts. And we really struggled, and we really, I made this declaration almost that everybody had to be located in the office. Everybody had to be there with us to understand it. But come to find out, you know what? Your reservations team doesn't necessarily need to be there. Your guest services team doesn't necessarily need to be there. Now, yes, obviously your GM, your owner relations people that are meeting with owners, even business development who are building relationships with realtors and local people like that, influencers, they need to be there. But the reservations, the guest services, and they did not need to be there. So what we ended up doing then is unfortunately having the right or the wrong people, and we were probably overpaying. And we were, at the time, really offshore talent wasn't that big a thing. And, right now you can obviously save a significant amount of money by leveraging offshore talent. And, we're doing that at Vintory. I mean, I would say, about 15-20% of our staff is actually offshore talent. And they are incredible employees, incredibly loyal. They do just as good a job, if not better. And we're paying them a fraction of what we're paying everybody else. So when we had very slim margins, and we'll talk about that in a second, we would have been, our profits would have been much greater if we were leveraging people offshore, and then also just in getting better talent in general by being able to broaden it. I mean, right now, Vintory is 100% remote. All 40 employees are. We do not have an office. So all 40 employees are remote, and we have the systems in place, and we've been that way from day one, and it just works. But you have to set up the frameworks. You got to put the system in place to make sure that does work.
Now, CJ, obviously some things are in-person jobs. We can't really get a cleaner from, another country to clean a cabin in Blue Ridge, Georgia, right? But like, talk me through, have you gone down this path with your own company of hiring folks remotely from other places? What's been your experience there?
100%. We often joke here in my house that I had to fire my wife and she's on permanent severance now. There are certain jobs that you don't have to have somebody at a physical location for, right? And I think some of them, the accounting, definitely, right? A lot of the reports, revenue management, your website management, digital marketing, stuff like that. They're definitely members of your team or contractors that you can have out. But then there are those crucial parts that you do need to have, especially for a vacation rental business. I think and this is something I subscribe to, and maybe down the road it proves to be a mistake, but right now I don't see it that way. But having a physical location from a vacation rental standpoint, whether it's an office on Main Street that people can see your name, they feel like it's physical, they can walk into it. You don't feel like you're just going to vanish, feel like you're part of the community. Sometimes you have to just consider that as advertising, right? And not necessarily crucial to the business, but it just, it adds to your presence in the community. An operations center, we invested big in an operations center. I got a hospitality background. I grew up in hotels. Like, there was always something magical about back of the house, right? You just felt the energy, things moving, things happening. It's all right there. You need this, you need that. It's all right here. And I really wanted to build that into our model. So I doubled down and put a lot of investment into what we have now, which is a 10,000 square foot operation center. And I promise you, if I blindfolded you, I walked you in, and then I took off that blindfold, you'd be like, oh, what hotel am I in? Like, literally, that's how you feel. You feel like you are in, like, there could literally be a 20-story building on top of our operation center. And that's exactly how we wanted it. We have very specific offices for certain parts of the team. And then you've got your maintenance department, your housekeeping department, your cleaning. We have a stand-up meeting area specifically where you can get people together. There's just something that happens, especially in this, where we're the last mile, right? When your contractors can come in, when homeowners can come in, it feels very tangible. So yes, there are absolutely parts of your business that you can make virtual. But I feel like to be really successful in the vacation rental space and to be able to really get traction, you want to have a physical location, one or the other. If it's just being on Main Street and advertising that you're there, or having some level of sophistication in an operation center that can handle those all the needs for your homes. I mean, we have what we call a mini Dollar General. Right. We just joke about it that way, but it is literally a store where all of our housekeepers can come, and we have just about anything and everything that a house would need, because we want their primary focus to be on cleaning and not running around. And this isn't just employee housekeepers. These are our contractors too. They can come into one spot. They can pick up all their laundry. They can grab the things that they needed for the house, whether it's a pool cue or whatever, or just go get that simple stuff, the toilet paper or the toilet brushes or the, anything that you could imagine, coffee maker, anything. We have it all in one spot.
Yeah, right on. Well, David, I know in your current role, obviously you're collaborating with folks that are halfway across the world in Tel Aviv, right? But like, I don't know actually how you handled it when you were running the management company. Did you employ global talent team members as well at that time, or what was your experience there?
Yeah, we've always had a bit of a hybrid work environment. So that's been the case in terms of some full-time in the office, some part-time in the office, part-time at home, and then some full-time out of the office remote. And so we've had that. It's largely role specific. What I would say is there's going to be an element of distributed workforce, as people like to call remote. Oftentimes it's a bit of a misnomer, but people will use that term referring to remote. But any global company has a distributed workforce. You're going to be spread across offices and have a lot of the same challenges that remote work will oftentimes have. You just still have a higher level of accountability on each individual's time when you have a global office somewhere else that's meeting with an office, say here in the U.S. So I think that we definitely saw a bit of a whiplashing back and forth due to COVID, where everything went remote. And then a lot of people have wanted to return to the office. Dell would be a good example of this. In June, Dell announced, hey, no promotions for anybody that's remote. Come on back to the office. And 50% of Dell's workforce said, yeah, we're actually okay with that. I don't need a promotion or a raise, which is pretty crazy and tells you something about those people. And so that's an interesting maybe argument against remote work, but I think there's a lot of arguments for remote work. I think that, like CJ was saying, there is still absolutely value in having an office. And I would personally say one of those biggest values of having an office and having your team together at an office is the culture is easier to maintain. It's not to say it's impossible to maintain when you're fully distributed, but it's easier to maintain when you have that water cooler conversation and you're messing with each other over last night's NFL game, or you're talking about what the kids just did at school and that type of thing. And then you're going to get together for lunch and going out for a drink after work. There's just a culture aspect that's hard to duplicate with remote work.
Mm-hmm. We're recording. This will come out much later, but I don't know if you should have mentioned last night's NFL game to Brooke on this podcast. I think that was kind of a bad idea, but I digress for the listener. All right, we'll keep it going, so I don't get shot through.
Or David Portnoy, didn't he put like 300,000 on that game for Baltimore to win?
Who did?
But that's like me putting like the change in my pocket on that. I don't know if that really counts for much.
Brooke, you put 300,000 on it?
No, David.
All right. I don't know how to pivot that into EOS, so I won't even try. We'll just go hard to number 6 then, Brooke. Number 6, not running a structured business operating system like EOS. So the joke on this podcast has been they owe you a commission at this point. You've sent so many people their way, but for to make this the canonical version of it, what is EOS? How has it helped your business?
Yeah, I mean, well, this one comes up all the time. It's EOS is entrepreneurial operating system. It's a framework of really just how to run a small, medium-sized business. And, look, when I started Vantage, it was my second business. So I was in mortgage banking before. I had a pretty large mortgage banking company. But like when I came to launch Vantage, like I didn't have any kind of framework. I didn't have any kind of system. Like we just kind of did it. I would do one-on-ones with my team, and we had a weekly all hands, and that was kind of it. And look, I mean, I have a business degree, but they didn't teach me squat about how to actually run a business. And again, that's what EOS does. EOS is a structured framework. And what I like about it is there's like a cadence to it, right? And there's a cadence, there's accountability, and they use the word traction, and I've heard CJ use the word traction a couple times today, and it's so true. Like that's what it gives you. It gives you that. That's a great way to describe it. It just gives you that traction. So there's many different parts of it, but really, I mean, in my mind, you don't even have to use all of them. Just a couple different pieces. I mean, the ones that I like the best are what they call rocks, which is really kind of like your goal setting. So you have your annual goal setting, and then you roll that down, kind of waterfall down to your quarterly rocks. But you also do it from a company level, and then each individual, and then you have departments that have these rocks, and then you have the individuals that have them. And the individuals should be rolling down, like 80% of their goals or their rocks should be coming from the departmental rocks. And the departmental rocks should be rolling down from the company rocks. And if you think about how that works, it's like much of business is just about alignment. I mean, you think about it, most teams, if you have a team of 20, 30, 40 people, and very often they're all they think they're rowing in the same direction, but very often they're not. They're all going in different directions. But if you have this systematic framework that allows you to set the company rocks on an annual basis, and it rolls down to the quarterly basis, and it runs down to the departmental levels, and it runs down to the individual level, and if they're all pretty closely aligned, it's amazing what can happen. You can have a team of misfits But if they're in alignment, they are going to be much more successful than the greatest, all-stars. It's like when you see baseball teams, when you have this, group of all-stars, but they're just not gelling, they're not playing well together, and they end up, ending the season, 10 games back. And then you get a young team of kids, but are all like just aligned, and they're running together, and they're running in there to get good chemistry in the box. Like, those are the people that, like, when it works. And that's what I feel like EOS does. And it's funny. It's like every single person that I've recommended it to, and like you said, I should be getting a commission for this, but they all really absolutely love it. I know CJ is a big fan of it, and many of our partners are. And again, if you read the book, I think it was about half of the people in the book mentioned not running EOS as one of their biggest mistakes too.
Yeah, right on. I think you nailed it though a second ago. It seems overwhelming as you walk through that. It's like, man, if I'm not doing any of that, it feels like a lot to kind of take on. And maybe, I think, CJ, you've used an implementer before, so maybe we can come to that in 1 second. But I think it's kind of like working out, honestly, Brooke. It's like something is better than nothing. If you're doing nothing, that's not great. So like, even if you take bits and pieces of this and go for a walk for 30 minutes, that's better than sitting on the couch. Like, I think you can take bits and pieces and make some progress along the way.
Yeah, I mean, if you just use the rocks portion and the L10 meeting, like, I think you're getting 50% to 70% of the value out of it. Those to me are like the two biggest, and scorecard are probably the most important pieces of it.
Oh, keep going. Yeah. It's all important.
It is, but I'm just saying, look, it's all important. But again, you will get, if you want to, like,
I agree.
Lean into this, start with those two things, like, you will get, and then you will end up doing everything else.
Yeah. So CJ, it's something you use. Could you talk about kind of your awakening to this system and how you helped there?
Yeah, that was me. I've gone hard in the paint. I didn't just drink the Kool-Aid. I shotgunned the Kool-Aid. I funneled the Kool-Aid. I just straight up, like, yeah, I'm the poster child for EOS now. I will never own or run another business again without it. So you want to talk about a raving fan, a lunatic when it comes to something, it's going to be EOS. I started just like Brooke said, and that would be my number one advice, like, to anybody. Yeah, go ahead and try a couple things, but the moment you get any kind of positive reinforcement from those small things, right? If you just want to dip your toe in and experiment, fine, do it. But as soon as you get even the taste that it's working, go all in. Like, that was my mistake where I relate to this, is I just adopted a couple pieces and that was enough for too long, right? Instead, like, it was an investment, but it was probably one of the single best investments that we made, because we've now used that to reorganize our company, to implement new technologies for our acquisitions. Because you can use it. It's not so rigid that you are stuck in this one thought process. It allows you a lot more flexibility. So I would say the top things, I actually did a LinkedIn post, or replied to a LinkedIn post. We might be able to put that in the show notes as well, from that Brooke had posted something, because I just went on a rant. Like, you want to trigger me? Ask about EOS. I mean, I'll bore you. Like, seriously. But I would say the absolute biggest things is your vision traction organizer, to be able to take your big picture, and to Brooke's point, it takes that big picture and it breaks it all the way down to a weekly meeting, right? You can go 10 years out or you go 3 years out, but regardless what it is, it will own and house that vision, right? And it will then break it down into the small bite-sized pieces. Accountability. Like, if you keep those meetings running and you actually run the EOS agenda the way that it was meant to be run, I don't mean this in a negative way, but you can't hide anywhere in an organization. Like, you are held accountable every week. And this has been a big one for me. I would say probably the biggest. And this is an intangible. I don't think it's really ever called out on EOS, but an idea repository. I'm the idea guy. Everybody knows it. I will come in a room and I will idea you to death, right? One of the cool things is now I don't go to this person or that person with, hey, the idea of the week. Instead, I put it into EOS It goes into the parking lot. It sits. We have quarterly meetings where those ideas get to come up. The team gets to decide if they think my harebrained idea is good or not, right? And then they get to buy in on it and vote with their, like, I have the time. That's a great idea. Let's do it. And it actually gets pushed through the system and you can see it happen. Right?
Because what was happening before, CJ, you were coming up with all, and I agree 100%. You're an idea guy. You were coming up with all these great ideas and you were throwing them at everybody. And everybody's like, oh my God, I cannot handle one more freaking idea from CJ. And then what they're doing is then they're not focusing on the core things that actually matter.
Yep. So it does. Our implementer said it. He was like, CJ, you get to be the gas, and Bob, my GM, gets to be the brake. Right. And it works. Like, when you have an idea, put it here. And that's what I do now. I go into the app that we use to run it, and I can just drop the idea right there. And then this is the best part for me. Then I can forget about it. Yeah. And it lets me, So anyway,
little plug for the app. It's called 90.io.
Yeah. You have unleashed a beast. I tell you what. Love that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think this is kind of like CJ, if someone does CrossFit or if they're vegan, like, you don't have to ask them, they'll tell you eventually. This is CJ.
Yeah. Well, let's not talk about cold plunging.
Yeah. David, I have no idea your perspective on all this because I don't think we've ever talked about this before. So what's your perspective
just talk
on
about
EOS?
cold plunging. Don't talk about EOS.
Yeah, the operating system we mainly use is Windows 95 here. I think CJ said plenty for both of us. We can just move on. CJ beat that one to death.
All right, we've got a convert and we've got a not convert there, but that's okay. All good. Number 7, then, not charging a higher guest fee to offset the abnormally low owner commission in our market. So go in a very different direction here, Brooke, on pricing. How did you end up choosing the fee structure, and what number ended up being the right fee structure for you guys in the business?
So unfortunately, when I started, the first thing I did is I got a management, I secret shopped every one of my competitors and I got their management contracts, and they all were charging between 13 and 16%. And I just thought that's what you charged, and so I was like, okay. I didn't know from, other markets, other companies were charging 20%, 25%, or even, much higher in some markets. So that's kind of where we did it. And we had a very small, guest fee. I don't even think there was a guest fee. I think it was just a security deposit insurance kind of fee for like $39. And, I was really struggling to get the numbers to work. I'm like, busting my butt, working, and we're growing. And, at the end of the year, we're barely breaking even. And then, so I always build, I don't do business plans. I think business plans are kind of bogus. I mean, I think it's good, I guess, to get your ideas and thoughts down onto paper. But my idea of business plans were always, were performas. I would build I was a corporate finance major in college, and I would build out the model in a performa. And then I had obviously lots of different assumptions, and it would just show exactly what you could do. And I say, all right, at this point, we're going to hire this, many people. And it was a great way to do it. It was pretty amazing. I could actually predict within a couple percentage points very often how close we were going to be. And then I think I had this epiphany one time when I'm projecting out, this is maybe year 2, year 3, our numbers. And we were still breaking even, because we were investing so much back into growth and, and scaling. And then I remember I had this epiphany where I said, well, let's just change that little $39 fee to $99. And we instantly went from losing money at the end of the year to actually making money. So it's so funny. We do all this work, all this effort, and it's a damn little security deposit insurance fee is the difference between losing money and making money. It kind of reminds me, I heard a couple years ago when if you looked at the airlines, there was a direct correlation to their baggage fees to their profits at the end of the year. So you do all this work, and your profit comes down from flying some bags around when it's all said and done. So what I realized too later was many other people were charging not only much higher guest fees or actually charging guest fees on the front end, but they were also even making it a percentage based. And I heard stories of people charging, when they did 3%, I thought they were crazy. And then I heard 5%. I even heard some people were 10%. But I think that, that may be a little bit excessive, but I think it has to come from somewhere. And if you look at these companies out there, that have a very low fee, commission to the owner, they got to make up for it somewhere else, or else you really don't have a business. So we should have been a little bit quicker to adapt and pushed it on the front end. And once we did kind of realize that, it did definitely help the profitability of the company.
CJ, what's been your evolution on the guest fee side of things? How have you started? Where are you at today on that side of things?
Well, it started when I was at a VRMA in Nashville. I think it was maybe even the same year that I met you, Brooke. I was sitting in one of the meetings, and a guy stood up and he was like, "There isn't a fee that I haven't met yet that I don't like." Right?
Doug Brindley said that.
Yeah. And at the time, I mean, it was still, we're static rates and all that stuff. There was no dynamic pricing, and there was only a couple things that that most people were charging for. But I've been I try to keep a very balanced approach, because at the end of the day, the customer's paying for it, right? And that's what we're always looking at, is bottom line to bottom line. Like, everybody's trying to figure out the best way to get there, but at the end of the day, is the guest happy with what they paid for what they got? So my philosophy is, as long as that guest fee that they can see or not translates to value, then sky's the limit.
Yeah. Well, it's a sustainability thing too. Maybe, David, you could speak to that side of it. I know you've thought deeply about pricing and, how much commissions should be charged, and the percentage of things that go into different areas. But to Brooke's point, if you're unprofitable, then your business can't continue. How have you kind of gone through that process when you were running the management side of things? How did you handle this kind of issue, the guest fee issue? How did you make it fair?
Yeah, we were too shy on fees in property management days. We exited that business in 2016. And so people were a little more timid on the fee front back then than they are now. We did have a quote, unquote, self-underwritten damage protection plan or something like that. Made decent coin with that. So that would be the one little thing we did. Of course, then as we went on to become an OTA, and compete with Airbnb and Vrbo and other OTAs, we added the guest service fee. And the guest service fee is what allowed us to be operational. Without that, we would not have been in business. And the same is true for Airbnb. People, sometimes think, oh, well, they just run a website and that's all they do. Well, there's a lot that goes into that, creating a global brand or even a regional brand that takes money. And what's cool as a property manager to actually be able to leverage some of those is find the ones that are losing money because they're spending so much on CAC, back to Brooke's first point, and leverage their loss combined with their economy of scale to get bookings cheaper than you could. And it doesn't even matter if you can gain them as a guest the second time. It's cheaper than they can buy a booking, at an economy of scale with the best conversion rate optimists in the world and all of that. And so there's advantages where you can start to play with these numbers and really leverage them for your own good. But I've said for a long time, all property managers should have their own service fee, guest service fee, whatever we want to call it, and take that money and dump it into their own marketing and dump it into exceptional guest experiences, and you can do so much with that money. If you operate a brand in Blue Ridge, maybe it includes free hiking guides or a free night out at the brewery or breakfast one day a week at some cool restaurant. And you start to take that money as you charge it, but now you get these perks almost like you would with Hilton or Marriott if you booked directly through them, that you don't get if you don't book directly through that brand. And then it doesn't just stay this race to the bottom on price, and instead you're elevating the experience when you book direct.
Mm-hmm. Preach. Now we're getting into things that I'm passionate about, and I can go on for an hour on, but we won't. So I love
that. I've done my intro, let's get to the 7 points.
Exactly. All right, Brett.
Shall we talk about EOS?
Yeah. we've all got our little pet projects here in this list, Brooke. So you've generated some great discussion.
Could you apply EOS to the service fee? Then we'd really
to whatever you want.
Yes.
We're going to EOS the service fee. Let's go.
All right. Number 8 then, not leveraging a CRM and marketing automation platform for new inventory acquisition. I wonder what you came up with there. We've lost dozens of new contracts per year by not having automated follow-up in place. Brooke, how did you solve your problem of not having the right CRM platform for homeowner acquisition?
Yeah. So, remember, this is when I started Vantage, it was 2007, and there weren't a lot of, CRMs out there, or, that were really inexpensive or easy to use. So I mean, just to give you an idea, so again, I came from mortgage banking. We didn't even have a CRM in mortgage banking. So what I used there was literally, we would have these lead sheets. It was like a 1-page lead summary. And I said, so when I came over to Start Advantage, I'm like, let's do the same thing. So I literally had paper. I had a folder, and I had like a rack of all my different stages of where they were, just like from my mortgage pipeline days. And I had literally every single person that would call in, every single person that I had as a lead, I would fill out a sheet for them. I had my 1-pager, and I would literally like end my nights by just picking out that folder, just like I did when I was dialing for dollars at my mortgage company, and I would literally just go through them and just start. And I had all the notes on the back, how many times I called them, how many times I left a message. And it was just it was almost like a boiler room time of a profile, but I had to get those properties in the early days. But what happened was, as we started scaling, and I wasn't the only one actually doing owner acquisition at that point. We had a team that was doing this. They had to have their own system, and I had to kind of rely that they were keeping track of it. But guess what? They weren't. I know they weren't. So I mean, the best thing, not even the best thing, but the one thing that I finally did was I had a spreadsheet to at least keep track of these. But I know, now, when we've helped, with Vintory, we've helped over 800 different companies with their inventory growth efforts. And obviously a big core piece of our platform is our CRM. And we know from tracking this, because we track all of our different partners, we have a lot of benchmarks. Most of our partners, about 50% of the deals that they are closing are deals that are coming from the lead was in a long-term nurturing sequence at one point. So what does that mean? That means when the first time you spoke to them, they were not ready to buy. They were not ready to sign. So you had to put them into that long-term nurturing sequence, and you let the software do the follow-up for you. It's going to do these little sporadic, whether it's a monthly or a quarterly touch point. And we know that is regenerating and getting people back in. But I know, look, I've been in everybody's shoes. The average person does not have the bandwidth to sit there and do that constant follow-up. Unless you're a full-time business development rep and this is your only job. But guess what? I would say 70-80% of the people in this business, that's not their primary job. They're wearing multiple hats. They're the GM, they're the owner, the COO, whatever it happens to be. They're doing lots of different things. They don't have that bandwidth. They don't have the time to do that constant follow-up. So if you have a CRM that has marketing automation built into it, it could be HubSpot, it could be Salesforce, it could be, Zoho has a version. Just get something so it'll constantly do that follow-up for you, because I guarantee you, again, based on helping over 800 different companies, with many, many, many of them are closing deals that were in that stage, and that you are leaving money on the table if you're not using something like that.
Yeah. CJ, have you leveraged a CRM for your homeowner acquisition efforts?
Funny you should ask. Yeah, I'm proud to be called customer number one on Vintory. So from the moment that the idea was conceived, I was like, that really sounds like a no-brainer. And I would go back to say that this is buying back your time, right? That's something I've always said to anybody that's asked me about, Vintory specifically, is that it helped me buy bandwidth, right? And it also gave me, just for that specific track in our business, it gave me one tool to train on, one tool to house all those leads, to make sure they were getting followed up with on and everything. And it allowed me to delegate that task, because that was like homeowner acquisition. I think most vacation property managers will relate to this. It's kind of like that one thing that's really hard to let go of, right? That the owner of the company feels like they're just the only one that can go out and represent their brand. Well, I can tell you right now, I miss it. It's honestly, it's one of my favorite parts. I love talking to homeowners. Obviously, everybody knows I like to talk to, right? But I love talking to homeowners. That's like my thing. I loved selling Southern Comfort Cabin Rentals, the energy, the passion for it and all that. Super hard to pass on, right? But when you do find somebody that's good at it, typically they're not good at keeping track of stuff, right? Or keeping up with leads and stuff like that. So what I found is that when you get that sales profile that's good at selling, you also need to give them a good tool that's just built for that. So there's my plug. That's what Vintory has done for us. And I don't know if everybody's really thought about it that way or used it that way, but for me, it allowed me to to delegate that task and to know, like, I can go into Vintory, I can see what the sales leads are, I can see where they are, I can see if they've got it to contract, right? They can set up appointments, they can do all of those things. So I mean, whatever the CRM is that you use, whether it's for that vertical in your business or another, I'm a big believer in that, in those tools.
Yeah. Well, David, I imagine you didn't use Vintory in your property management business because it didn't exist, but did you have something similar that you were using at the time?
We cobbled together a bunch of solutions. We used Google Sheets. We used Yesware to actually kind of track how contacts were interacting with things. But that's not scalable. You know, we had 120 or so properties at that point, and we were still doing pretty intense outreach, postcards. We were putting tracking phone numbers on the postcards, and we could track them down to the neighborhood and all that. But with all of these things that we were trying to accomplish, we would make mistakes. Like one time the phone didn't ring from postcards for a while, and we're like, what's going on? Our marketing's not working. Well, we had the wrong Twilio number because we'd forgot to pay the $1 a month on that one and didn't re-up it. And so I don't know who was getting all those phone calls. I'm sorry if you're listening to this. But it's probably like, I mean, we've all had the calls like where you're getting the call from Domino's or for Domino's to order a pizza, and they used to have a number or they're one digit off from you. That poor person's probably still getting calls for a good deal on property management in the Smokies. But I mean, I think that one of the things, I think it was CJ said it a second ago, that's so relevant here is, or maybe it was Brooke, it was somebody, the idea of building your own on something or cobbling your own recipe together versus going with something that's pre-made. And I would say having a front row seat to the cobbled together solution, which was an okay solution at that time, versus like HubSpot, which is what we're using right now for DMOs, big kind of like B2B clients that take forever to close is a good way to think of them. And we have all of these sequences in there and all these lead scoring things in there. And then like after they sign, it moves them over to this thing. You know, John Flanagan, who's a wizard with this stuff, set it all up. And then like you have Brooke with Vintory that has just a freaking awesome homeowner acquisition CRM. I've seen us build a CRM at Guesty. What I can tell you is all of these take a crap ton of resources to build. And it is those resources that fine tunes them for those industries and those applications. And you are going to miss out if you aren't using a great CRM for property management, for homeowner recruitment, for small business. If you need HubSpot, whatever it is, you're going to miss out and you are going to get left behind because there are features in that you can't cobble together with your little recipe. And it doesn't matter how good you are at cooking, you're going to burn the cake.
Exactly. I think that's a good way of ending that one. All right, number 9 then,
Don't
Brooke.
burn the cake.
Don't burn the cake. That could be a bumper sticker. Number 9.
Nobody likes burnt cake.
Nobody.
And I'm sorry about your phone ringing, whoever that is in Gatlinburg.
Yeah. All right, Brooke, number 9, not proactively extending an olive branch to local competitors to build out a local network. This is one of the most common ones, Brooke, but maybe what was your experience with it, of actually reaching out then eventually to local competitors and becoming friends even?
Yeah, this definitely was common, and I thought the exact same thing. I was like, you know what? And if you look, it's so weird, like, and we see this across the board, but you're so competitive with all these other local companies, and they're like the enemy, and you can't talk to them. I mean, I remember at one point I wanted to do something silly. I literally got a grill, and we were like grilling out and giving free hot dogs to all the guests that came in, because they would come in and they would wait in line. This is when you actually had to check in at the office to get keys. So I was out there literally flipping hot dogs. And then serving it. Our competitor next door literally called the I don't even know what organization it was, but they the town and shut us down because we didn't have like a food vendor license. I mean, it's not like I was selling these things, but it's like that was the nature of like this competitiveness. I'm like, here I'm trying to do a nice thing, try to welcome people to the Ocean City, give them a Coke, give them a hot dog, and now my competitor is doing this. So I wish earlier on we would have reached out to these local competitors and just had lunch, right? Had a beer and got to know them and realized, you know what, this is a big market. There's enough business for all of us to go around, and there is actually a net benefit in the end. And it was one of the things that I actually did, the first things I did, at Vintory, I remember specifically there was this young kid named JJ King. He launched a competitor. It's called VRM Leads at the time. And I'm like, oh, shoot, this kid, because we didn't have any competition. We were literally created this category in our industry. So the first thing I did is I reached out to him. I said, look, I just want to introduce myself, say hello. And, if you need anything, if you had any ideas or, you want to bounce some ideas off me, happy to do it. He was a little skeptical, but we stayed in touch. And next thing you know, a couple of months later, he's like, Brooke, you know what? Like, do you ever think about buying me? And I was like, absolutely. So he ended up going into his deal, see what kind of looking at his financials, and we ended up buying him. And he was a key employee on our team for years. Now he's since gone on and he started a vacation rental management company. He's been very successful, but he implemented so much stuff. But we would have never hired him had I not, extended that olive branch. And I'm sure I lost on many, many opportunities by not reaching out to my local competitors in Ocean City and just kind of extending that olive branch.
Yeah. CJ, what's your kind of approach then to local folks? Obviously, you're in a very competitive market, lots of, people up there doing kind of similar services. What's kind of been your experience like Brooke was in that same situation?
Yeah, this is another area that I could go deep. I don't want to turn us into a Lex Friedman podcast at 2 hours. So I'll keep this as short as I possibly can. And I wrote down a question to myself is what do competitors do? They usually make us better, right? So my philosophy has been this. I got a couple things, right? One of my competitors, we recently merged, right? He's on his way down here now. He and his wife and me and my wife are going to go to dinner tonight. We're going to have a fun weekend and hang out. That was a competitor. It's now one of my best friends. He's one of my business partners. So, right. Be careful who you build. Be careful who you build that wall, be careful who you keep out if you build that wall, right? If you want to wall your competitors out or you want to keep them at arm's length over there, you may be keeping yourself from a future bestie, right? So what I would recommend everybody do is if you've got the phone number of one of your competitors, either your number one competitor, number two, number three, doesn't matter. Thanksgiving is right around the corner. On Thanksgiving Day, send them a happy Thanksgiving and say, I'm grateful for you because of what you do helps me be better, right? Just extend the olive branch. It's right around the corner. All ships rising the tide, right? You're still going to be competitors, but you can be friendly too.
Right on. David, what was kind of your perspective on the operational side, previously with that? Were you reaching out to folks in the Smokies or what were you doing back then?
A competition is a funny thing. Like CJ was saying, it makes us all better. Without competition, we're a monopoly, which sounds really nice. That's not the realm any of us actually work in, though. So since we are in a somewhat commoditized industry, making friends with those other people that have an interest in the same commodity that we are offering is wise. We have regulation we need to think about. We have just idea sharing. There's vendor information that, this guy's tried this vendor and will probably let me know if he's a snake oil salesman. It doesn't mean you're going to be buddy and sharing every inside secret with every competitor, but you may have competitors that you do that with if you're in an uber competitive market like Myrtle Beach or Destin, Gatlinburg, some of these where there's 400, 500 property management companies. And it's okay to actually share information, really good information with a few people that are your closest allies in that battle or do something cool together. So I think that for me, one of the things, and this was actually one of my mistakes that I wrote down when Brooke asked me for mine, was I didn't make friends with the competition soon enough, and that was an opportunity that I left on the table. But what ended up happening, thankfully, and still ended up okay, was a lot of that competition actually became customers of mine with our listing site. It would have been much easier if I'd already been having drinks with them once a month to then say, hey, I've got a listing site now. Do you want to be on it? And I would have hit scale faster had I been doing that. It ended up okay. And now I'm still friends with a lot of those people like Sean from Ant Bugs out in the Smoky Mountains, whereas I wasn't friends with them when we were going head to head for a homeowner. Now we're buddies. And I missed out on years of friendship and years of business by not swallowing my pride and reaching out to competition sooner.
Right on. Awesome. Well, I think CJ said it well a second ago. We're very much over time here, but there's too much knowledge to make it really short. So on this one, maybe it's a relatively quick one, Brooke, to bring us home here, number 10. And thank you guys for hopping on recording today. This was all Brooke's doing, but it's been fun to kind of play host here a little bit. So number 10, to bring us home, not trying harder to work out co-founder conflict issues that we could have gone a little bit longer for. So sounds like a very specific one to you, Brooke, but what was kind of the situation here? How'd you learn from it?
Yeah. So it's funny. It goes back to that, like being cathartic and a very therapeutic, process of going through this. And, this one, this was actually hard to write. And it was me being vulnerable, me being candid by actually writing this in here. And even, I'm kind of struggling with what to even say right now, with this, but I didn't really, prep for this. But so I had a business partner, great guy. He was a friend. He was a mentor. I really looked up to him. Probably one of the smartest business people I've ever met in my life. Obviously business partner. And he really, helped me in a tough time, when, obviously the mortgage market melted down. I was in a tough spot, and the way I look at it, he came and really, put me in a good spot and to launch, Vantage. And, the business grew over time, and look, we struggled. We didn't grow as fast as we thought we would. And we didn't make as much money as we thought we would. And we had some conflicts in the early days. It was very minor. It wasn't, we were always very cordial. I didn't work hard enough to try to resolve those issues. I'm by nature, I kind of avoid conflict. I would bring it up, but I didn't push it. And I wish we would have almost brought in almost like a mediator or something, or I wish I would have pushed it a little bit more to try to resolve some of the core issues that we had. And so what I did is I probably the best way to look at it is I chickened out and I left. It was actually easier at that point to leave rather than actually like have the really hard conflict and that hard conversation to try to resolve it. But I truly believe, truly believe, based on our growth, based on the infrastructure we had, based on the resources that he had I stuck with it, and I hired an integrator, a GM or a COO, like we would be every bit as large as Vacasa right now, but profitable. And we'd be the largest vacation rental management company in the U.S. right now. I have no doubt in my mind. I sometimes have regrets of that. I don't have regrets of the current business. I absolutely love what I do. I love my team. But I sometimes look back and think, where would we be right now had I just pushed that a little bit and, had that conversation and, had a little bit of conflict? Could we have resolved it? So, yeah.
Yeah. Right on. I don't know if that's, that situation is exactly relatable, CJ, but I don't know if you want to add in any extra layers there, or David, before we wrap, but.
So yes, there are things that I can definitely relate to here, because our business started, I was partners with my mom, right? My mom has now, kind of transitioned in her life to a place where she's no longer involved in the business and unfortunately in a home, but because she's my partner, like there's things that I can do now with the business to support her where she's at. Right. And that's, we can't really put a price on that. And I had some conflicts with her along the way, like trying to figure out like certain things that we were going to do in the business. Right. She had a real estate background. I had a hospitality background. I didn't want to get involved in real estate. She wanted to get involved in real estate. So, anybody with a co-founder, I would say to Brooke's point, it's better to just, work it out, clear the air, right? And go, figure out if you can figure it out early. And if you can't, then make that decision as quickly as you can to figure out, how you're going to cohabitate or move on. Because the worst thing that can happen is you get to that size business where it really hurts to break up. I'd say the only other example is, my mom was my business partner, but once I actually moved into acquiring Southern Comfort, my first investor was her boyfriend at the time. So that was really interesting. And ultimately, over time, he has become a coach and mentor to me. And as our business got larger because of his experience, he kind of became the CFO side of me, right? And that actually turned into a conflict because I needed a different set of skills than what he would be able to provide to me just as a partner, right? It wasn't his it wasn't his day job. This was what he was doing to help me. Our business scaled beyond that point. We had to recognize it. And that took a tough conversation. Like, I didn't want to insult him and say, hey, look, I need somebody else to do what you do now because it's too big for what you do, right? But we had to come to the realization together that this was something we had to work through because it was putting a lot of stress and pressure on me because I was having to play this intermediary between someone that was just trying to help with something when I needed a professional that's all they did, right? So anybody with a partner or a co-founder, I think, is going to find themselves having to work through something, and that would be my number one takeaway from this: is if you sense it early, fix it early. Don't let it linger.
Right on. David, anything else to add into that kind of feeling or process?
Yeah, I mean, I've had the chance to both be a part of a few startups as well as watch a few startups. And my piece of advice on founder friction is one, it's going to happen. You will absolutely have friction with the other business owners, with the founders. That's normal. That's okay. And there's ways to deal with that in the moment, but the best time to deal with that is when you're founding the business or funding the business, and put people together in a room when you're in the dating phase to agree on the prenuptial. And what does this look like if we later on break up? What does this look like if one of us is getting out of our lane? And before you ever have that meeting, each of those individuals that's going to be in that room should reach out to friends who have had a nasty breakup in business and get their advice on the pitfalls, because those pitfalls can be navigated as long as you do it in advance. And you want to do it contractually. I don't care if it's your best friend, CJ's case, your mom, whatever it is. Everything is in that contract. Who's making decisions? Do they need to get permission from somebody else to sell the business, to sell a portion of the business? It could be a minority owner. What can they just go sell off 5% if they want? And if so, does that 5% now get a vote? These are things that oftentimes don't get discussed, but they need to be discussed. The contract needs to be ironclad, and everybody needs to be on the same page.
Right on. Awesome. Well, Brooke, I know this is the longest episode we've done by far, so I think we should probably wrap it at this point. But this was awesome to get the perspective of anybody. Brooke, if you could go back in time and ask your 25-year-old self something, what would it be? Tell your 25-year-old self something. What would it be?
Well, first off, I literally just recalled this because I was getting ready to I was thinking oh, this is how we end the podcast. Yeah. So I was getting ready. Yeah. But I literally did not prep for this, which you'd think I would have, considering I've asked it 30-something times so far. But it actually goes back to, I guess, one of the mistakes that I made, and it's really about the team. I think if I could go back to my 25-year-old self, if I could explain how important building the systems and the frameworks to recruiting and hiring and nurturing and building and developing the team is the most important thing that you can do. Again, you cannot build a business by yourself. The business is built by surrounding yourself with a bunch of really, really smart people. But if you are really good at recruiting and you're really good at building kind of that system and that framework, and you can build and retain a kick-ass team, you've got something special, because they will be able to solve those problems. They will be able to find the solution. They will be able to grow the business. And that is the most important part. Again, going back to the Elon Musk, metaphor or the analogy where, he was building the robots. That was in the factory was the most important thing that he did. I think the same thing is here. It's all about the team that you assemble.
Right on. Awesome. Well, sorry, let me go into the exit now. If you made it all the way this far, we super appreciate it. Brooke, this was fun. It was kind of fun to put you in the hot seat for once. And CJ and David, thank you a lot for coming along. We'll put links in the show notes to things we mentioned today. And of course, LinkedIn profiles for these guys. I can't imagine you ever heard them before, but if so, go check them out. Appreciate it. Have an awesome day. We appreciate the review, and we'll catch you on the next episode.